Former minister and founder of Something or Other Publishing, Wade Franson is the host of Created in the Image of God, a series that examines the role of religion in society, from messianic returns to the emotive responses transmitted through our culture. Wade fearlessly addresses reality claims from all directions, objectively exploring their compatibility with Holy Scripture. Tonight's episode, Crossing the Desert, with Payam Zamani.
Good evening, everyone. This is Wade France, and I'm the host of Created in the Image of God. And I was just on the phone with our guest for tonight. There seems to have been some kind of confusion, but he is on his way. So let me just take a couple of minutes to introduce you to him while we wait for him to arrive here in the studio. My guest is Payam Zamani. He is the founder, chairman, and CEO at One Planet Group. Payam Zamani has extensive work experience as a founder, chairman, and CEO in various companies. Since 2015, the founder, chairman, and CEO of Planet Group, which is a company focused on developing, operating, and investing in various industries such as advertising, tech, publishing, automotive, real estate, and marketing. He also served as the founder and chairman and CEO of BuyerLink, formerly known as Reply.com. That's a company that went public in an IPO, an initial public offering, and raised 1.2 billion in that initial public offering. His story has, for me at least, a little similarity with somebody I've always considered an inspiration, which is Andy Grove, the founder of Intel. And if you know the story of Andy Grove, he had to flee from the horrors of World War II, I believe from Hungary, and eventually make his way to the United States, where he then got involved in that. So Payam Zamani's story has some similarities to that, because he has written a book called Crossing the Desert, which details his escape from Iran and his arrival in the United States. So if and when, and I'm going to say when, Payam joins us here in the studio, we'll dive into all that. So in fact, right on time, here he is, having just done his introduction. The man of the hour, I'd like to welcome Payam Zamani into the studio. Welcome, Payam.
Hey, thank you, Wade. Good seeing you.
So you and I are both a little bit discombobulated here. I was waiting for you in the studio, trying to wing it, and you were somehow we didn't connect about it being tonight, it being live. But here you are. How does a man with your responsibilities and your busyness manage to suddenly shift gears and arrive live for a show like this?
Well, when you tell me to show up, Wade, I'll be there.
So it sounds like you have a good marriage, right? You've maybe practiced that in your relationship with that other half, perhaps, or
yeah,
because when I just show up wherever my wife tells me to. That's what I'm getting at here.
well, the good news is that, somehow this got mixed up on my schedule, but I was, I've been working longer hours than usual, and so it was easy for me to switch gears and be here with you, and I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. Well, I was just drawing a parallel between your journey and Andy Grove. Have you ever been compared to Andy Grove in the past, the founder of Intel, who fled, I believe it was Hungary or Romania, I forget, to arrive in the United States?
Yeah, no, I have not. But I remember during my early days building a business. I think it was a book he wrote, something about always being paranoid, and
Yeah, the saying is only the paranoid survive. That's one
only
of his
paranoid
quotes.
survive. Exactly, and
Right.
and I remember that that really resonated with me because I feel like I've always been a bit paranoid about what I don't know. There are lots of things that I can control, but lots of things that I cannot control, and it's the things I don't know that I cannot control. And but I don't think I've ever been compared to him. Andy Grove is definitely an icon.
Well, there's another thing, another person that comes to mind. I think it's Donald Rumsfeld who coined and made famous the known unknowns and the unknown
Right,
unknowns, right?
right.
But let's not talk about him. But I'm curious now. So that paranoia of the unknown, does that lead to an intense curiosity on your part to discover and search and find out?
That's interesting. I think that is part of it, but there is also another part to that, and that is the idea of always having a plan B. And I think it's almost like, because you don't know what's on the other side of the door, then you want to make sure that if what you see on the other side is something that is not what you want to see, you have a plan B. You have another way to get out. And I think that because of where I was as a child, how I grew up, I feel like having a way out has been kind of important. And so that's the way I look at it, more about a plan B than anything.
Yeah, I was instantly reflecting on my own experience when you were saying that, and I had a very difficult childhood, ended up in some situations where I had to really become a survivor, and I can relate to that sort of mode. So let's dive into that because, as you may recall, that's the normal format of our show is to understand your origin story, your creation story. So tell us a little bit about your parents and the home you were born into, and how those very early experiences before you were self-consciously aware of who you were and what you might become through your adolescence and teenage years. What was where did you come from? What's your origin story?
Yeah. So I was born a Baha'i to a Baha'i family in Iran, and if anyone knows anything about the Baha'i faith, they know that we're peaceful people, and so it was I guess a bit odd for me growing up in Iran as a Baha'i that why the government and so many people, the fanatics, uh, they wanted to cause harm to us. But that is what I was used to. People breaking our windows. When I was 4 or 5 years old, I remember people breaking our windows every night. So we would have to, when we have dinner, there was a bit of a half wall in our family room. We'd eat dinner behind that half wall because people were likely to break our windows at night during dinner time, and we just didn't want the rock or the glass end up on us and in our food. So that was kind of like the environment I grew up with. And then after the revolution that took place in Iran, things got a lot worse. So
Sorry, that was the early 70s, that revolution? Late
the
late
revolution
70s?
was in 1979. I was born in early 70s, so those experiences, people actually breaking our windows, was before the revolution. And after the revolution, things got a lot worse. So I feel like I was born into a family of devout Baha'is. My dad, who was a Muslim and became a Baha'i himself, he was on fire. He wanted to spread the unifying message of the Baha'i faith wherever he could. So, we lived in all kinds of remote places there were no Baha'is, and in fact, he would seek places that there were people who needed that message the most. And that caused me to get used to hardship. And uh, we were not looking for getting harmed, but we wanted to be able to spread that message. My parents wanted to spread the message.
So then as you became a little bit more aware, you were still living in Iran during your adolescence, 11, 12, 13.
Yeah.
How did that shape your consciousness yourself? Were you enthusiastically supportive of your father's zeal, or were you more shy and reticent and say, "Hey, stop drawing attention to us"? What were your emotions as a teenager in that
Mm.
context?
So I think there was a shift from before the revolution to after the revolution. Before the revolution, my dad had that zeal to go to remote places, live the life of spreading the message of the Baha'i faith. But then after the revolution, I think life changed a little bit. It was, you had a country that, the new government was killing Baha'is, had imprisoned thousands of Baha'is. Kids like me, 11-year-old, I was expelled from school in the worst possible way you can imagine. And and then there was a war going on with Iraq. So life had changed quite a bit, and we were probably a bit more in the survival mode than anything else.
So, what were the circumstances then around your departure, and should I call it an escape? This gets into your book, which we'll get into in a
Yeah,
minute. But to just what were the circumstances that led up to that?
yeah. So, I briefly just touched on the idea that I was when I was 11 years old, I was expelled from school. A mob that was that the what I call the chief hate officer, the person who on campus wanted to make sure that we were following all the Islamic laws, whether we were Muslim or not. That this person wanted the mob that day to cleanse the school of the infidels, and I was one of the two infidels in that school, one of the people who was not a Muslim. I survived that situation. I call that the bleeding mile in my book. I survived that situation, but then I wasn't able to live with my parents for a period of time. I couldn't be in the city where my parents lived, just because of the danger that was clearly present. And so I lived away from my parents at that young age for a few years. And then when we reunited, it also became clear that the situation was not really much better, at least where we lived was not much better. So finally, in 1987, we came to a conclusion that it was best for me to leave Iran. But the government had also taken away passports from Baha'is. The same government that was making life very difficult for Baha'is, was treating us like second-class citizens, wanted to get rid of us, had also decided that it wanted to keep the Baha'is in the country and cause as much suffrage as they could. So my parents decided that it was the right thing for me to leave, but then how do you leave when you don't have a passport? You have to get smuggled out. And that's what they did. They good law-abiding citizens that my parents were, somehow, some way, they found a smuggler that was able to get me out of the country. And the way you find the smuggler, later on I found, was that you talk to other families that they have sent their kids out of the country, and through them you finally find somebody who knows somebody who can make an introduction, and finally you hire someone and you find a way out. And that's what they did. And they paid $10,000 to a smuggler, and they're part of course, a network to get me to the other side, to Pakistan.
Well, let's then cut to a video of your book. We want to encourage the audience to engage with us because there will be copies of that book for the audience member whose comments we like. This video that we've prepared will give a little bit of insight into that whole journey. And right after this short video of that book, we'll dive into the topics that it raises. So don't go anywhere. We're talking to Payam Zamani, his new book, and his life crossing the desert. We'll be right back.
1987, a young man embarked on a journey that would forever change his life. At just 16, Payam Zamani fled persecution in Iran, escaping through the perilous emptiness desert. 5 days of relentless heat, dry winds, and an unwavering will to survive. Against all odds, Payam made it to America. 12 years later, he and his brother had achieved what seemed impossible, a billion-dollar IPO on Wall Street. But success on paper couldn't shield him from the harsh lessons of modern capitalism. In 2015, Payam set out to redefine what it means to be an entrepreneur, founding One Planet Group, a company built on the principles of spiritual capitalism. One Planet Group proves that business can thrive while taking care of people, communities, and the planet. In Crossing the Desert, Payam shares his intimate journey, offering profound insights into the paths we choose and the values we hold dear. Discover how embracing life's most difficult journeys can lead to a brighter future, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. Join Payam Zamani in Crossing the Desert, and let his story inspire your own journey of resilience and transformation. Get your copy today and start your own journey towards a brighter future.
Welcome back. That was a little promo for the new book. So tell us what led you to decide to go ahead and write that book.
You know, I'm not an author. I'm not a writer. But I felt like I had a story to tell, and I had written this book um, twice before, but I had not published it. And the reason was, to be honest with you, I wasn't sure if there would be enough of an audience to read this book. But then, when in recent years, the whole concept of hope and what this country stands for, on one hand, and then also seeing the situation in Iran, in other places in the world, not getting better, it inspired me to want to tell this story and to also want to talk about how we can potentially collectively build better companies here in the US. Uh, and I thought that the foundation of everything I'd experienced in my life was my faith. And I wanted to put that together in the form of a book that would tell my story, but would also shine the light on what many people are experiencing in other places on the planet and how the US can represent that hope that they're seeking. And at the same time, as part of telling my story, to talk about uh, the US and the capitalism and how we can potentially bring more joy to our own lives to the and lift up our businesses so we can elevate them to serve humanity. And I found them all to be very connected. So I finally put the book, decided to write the book. It took me about 2.5 years, and I'm glad I did. It's the book is not out yet; it'll be out next week. But I'm really humbled by uh, all the feedback I've received from people, all the messages I've received from those who have seen the early copies of the book. So I feel like it's one of those stories that maybe it's never too late. But I think particularly when we live at this cross section of the situation in the world and the situation with business, greed, materialism, I feel like there's an intersection here that this book covers. That the timing I think is right.
Yeah, all of those topics are critically important to all of us. I'm intrigued by your representation of America as a land of hope, because America, in my view, and by the way, I'm an immigrant. I was born in Canada, and I lived pretty much half my life outside the U.S. Until I was 40, and lived in multiple different countries and had the opportunity to look at this question from multiple different nations, as what a nation should be, and what America represents to the world. I'm curious as to your perspective, coming from Iran and then arriving in America and now representing America as a country of hope, because again, it's under attack in my view from many directions as
Yeah.
something other than a country of hope.
Yeah, so there's no question that you've got an environment in this country that we have lost, in a sense, at some level our way. I wrote an article about a couple of years ago talking about is that light that this country has had, is it dimming? I don't think so. I think a lot of people talk about it in that manner, but I don't think so, because if you are today a teenager anywhere in the world that atrocities are affecting your life, even if you're a teenager in Gaza, you're not thinking that Saudi Arabia is going to save you. You don't think that China or Russia are going to save you, but you do think that potentially US is going to save you. That to me is a spiritual destiny that this country has. And to me, that represents the kind of hope and the kind of, what is an integral part of this country, which is truly special. And I think that some of us today in this country are kind of running away from it. We feel that by being an isolationist, we kind of better this country. I don't think so. This country is meant to be much, much bigger than that.
So let's talk a little bit about your then foray into the business world, because you arrived here at age 16, is that right?
I left Iran. I
So
escaped
so
Iran when I was 16. I arrived when I was 17.
okay, so tell us a little bit about that experience. Bring us
Mm,
into the life, the mind of that 16-year-old as you were being smuggled out. So I'm assuming there was hope, but there was surely also a lot of fear
yeah.
at that moment.
No, it's interesting. Actually, today I was talking about this exact subject with someone, and here's the interesting thing. When I and as I wrote this book, I had to go back and put myself in that situation. And interestingly enough, when I think about those days, I don't have a whole lot of emotions about myself. My emotions were primarily about others, about my mom who had brought me to that border town, and she was saying goodbye to her son, the final remaining sibling that she had with her, um, about basically how she was feeling at that moment. And I think that that's where my mind was, that's where my heart was, thinking about my mom's experience, thinking about the people I was leaving behind, a lot more so than my own feelings.
So what is the situation with your family in Iran now?
So my family, they ultimately, everyone left. My brother and sister, they had left before I left Iran. They had left in the same manner that I did. And my parents also left Iran in the same manner after I left Iran. It took a lot of persuasion by me and my siblings to convince them to leave. But my dad felt like staying in Iran was a form of showing resilience, and he was right. But at the end of the day, the need for the family to be together was greater.
So what was that journey like? What were the specifics of being smuggled?
So I'll take you back a little bit to. I'll try to make this short. Um, I had my mom had. We lived in Shiraz, which is in southern Iran, south central in Iran, and. But the night before me leaving for the border town, we were in Tehran, the capital city, and we had just met the contact that the smuggler had in Tehran, and the contact had enough information about me that I could pass on to somebody in that border town, so that individual would be able to identify me when we'd get there. To get to that border town called Zahedan, it was a 24-hour bus ride through what is called Dasht Lut, or emptiness desert, which NASA, by the way, says it's the hottest place on the planet, with the temperatures rising to 152 degrees Fahrenheit. And after 24 hours, at 8 a.m. on July 7th, we arrived in Zahedan, so in the middle of summer. And the smuggler had told me that I cannot say goodbye to my mom. They thought that me saying goodbye in that border town where Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan meet, which is one of the more dangerous places on the planet to be, could raise suspicion because there are others who are leaving the same manner. So he had told me, get off the bus, don't look back, don't say goodbye to your mom, don't touch your mom, go to the side of the road, and a car will pick you up. I did exactly as I was told. I had a small duffel bag with me. I went to the side of the road, and a white Iranian-made car stopped, and the guy asked me to get in. I got in, and the car sped away. And I remember I just looked back through the rear window of the car. I saw my mom, and for a moment, our eyes, I feel like, locked. But when I think back, I doubt she could really see me because of the reflection of the sun and so on. But I could see how she was, I could tell she was crying out loud inside, but she could not show any emotions. And what was going through my mind at that moment was how much harm a country must have done, a government must have done, that a mother thinks that my kid is safer out there with this smuggler that by their nature should not be trusted than staying with me in this country. The car made a left turn, and that was it. I could not see my mom anymore. But I was thinking, what happened to her? She was just on that bus for 24 hours. Now she has to take another bus for 24 hours back to Tehran. How will that ride go for her? I was in a hidehouse till that evening. It was 8 a.m. till about 8 p.m. And then there was a group of me, another boy, and four Jewish girls that at about 8 p.m. they put us on the back of a truck, four in the back, two in the front. There was a driver, there was an assistant that he had. It was a Grand Cherokee truck, an old one, and that was raised. They put us in that. They covered those in the back with a tarp, and the truck left the courtyard of the hidehouse. It went on a highway, and by highway, it's a 2-lane highway. And the truck was speeding really fast. And there was a moment that I saw that the road is making a right turn, and the driver turned off his lights and at the same speed went straight out into the desert. And the truck was all over the place, but we knew that from that moment on, our lives were in by far a greater danger. We were very close to the border, and that went on for a long time, for hours. At about midnight, we got to a place that we could see the border guards, and the driver made sure that they cannot see us, but we could see them. And there was a stretch of highway that they were patrolling. When their car, the border guards, was far enough, we crossed the highway. The assistant driver ran out, swept the highway, so they could not see the tire marks when they would come back. We continued driving until we got to a place that there was a mountain range that we could not go beyond that. There were motorcycles waiting for us. We got on those dirt bikes, went on for another hour. Then the dirt bikes could not go any further. And then we had to basically hike the rest of the way. And we hiked for the following 5 hours. And ultimately, as the sun was coming up, we arrived to the other side that, in my book, I talk about how it reminded me of the movie Lawrence of Arabia. It's just sand and the sand dunes, just exactly you've seen in that movie. And we were absolutely tired. We were not expecting that kind of a journey. And from a distance, we saw these two trucks coming towards us. And I could tell we were in Pakistan because the steering wheels were on the other side. They picked us up, me and another boy in one, and the 4 girls in another, and they took us to a fort. And when I say fort, I mean like a fort from that you would see in the movies from hundreds of years ago, with massive gates that open. You go inside, people are doing all kinds of odd stuff. They put us in that fort for a while. But I remember really vividly, that was really interesting, was that there was a Coca-Cola sign that was beaten down by sand and the wind and so on. And it was still screeching back and forth in the wind. And I was just wondering, how did that end up here in the middle of absolutely nowhere? They put us on a bus, ultimately, a bus that had everything on it. This was a bus that, looked like a normal bus, but it had a wooden, kind of like the bus itself was made out of wood, so it was screeching as he would drive, and there were goats and there were chickens and everything, and all kinds of illegal people who had ran away from something on that bus, and maybe drugs, maybe other stuff. I don't know what that bus was doing in the middle of nowhere. And they put us on that bus, and for the next 3 days I was on that bus. And this bus did not have seats, it had benches. And we went on till we got to a town called Kuwaita 3 days later. And the journey goes on. There's a lot there that I've talked about in a couple of the chapters about this journey, but that was just the beginning of it. We had to spend a week in Kuwaita, and there are Baha'is luckily everywhere. So the Baha'is of Kuwaita that were notified we had a phone number, we called them. They came and they took us to the United Nations outpost, and that's where we got our temporary asylum papers. A week later, I ended up in Lahore, Pakistan by train on the other side of Pakistan. And for that journey, I put on Pakistani clothes so I would not stand out. And I got to the other side of Pakistan, and that's where my brother and sister were. And I was with them for the rest of my time in Pakistan. The part of the journey that it's like there are those experiences that really stay in your mind forever, and they shape who you are, has to do with when I ultimately received my permanent refugee status from the United Nations. I went to Islamabad, Pakistan, and I went to the US Embassy. And I told the person at the front, he said, "Why are you here?" I said, "Well, I wanna apply to go to the US." And in my mind, I'm thinking me and everybody else. And they invited me in, and they treated me with respect. They, in fact, hired a lawyer to fight on my behalf to get my case approved and presented to the ambassador. And I thought that here I am, 16 years old. My own country has basically pushed me out, pushed me away, did not show me any human rights of any shape or form. Here's a country exactly on the other side of the planet, doesn't owe me anything, but does believe that my life is worth something. And that is when, for the first time at that age, I experienced human rights. And when I say this country has a special place, is because I've experienced it. I've seen what happens when you don't have the rights that a proper country gives you. So I think that as Americans, we have a lot to be proud of. Now, there are other countries that would have let me in too. The UK was, Australia was. But I think that the US goes beyond that, the opportunities that it offers. And so I was grateful for that. And then ultimately, I didn't have the money to buy my ticket to come to the US. And it was Catholic Charities out of New York that bought my ticket. So I could have that memorable journey of flying from Pakistan to San Francisco, and which still, every time I land in San Francisco, I cannot help but think about that day that I landed in San Francisco. And out of the window of the plane, I will look out and I will see those hills. And, on one hand, I had anxiety. I was scared. What will my life will be like? I don't speak the language. I don't know anybody. I don't know the system. But on the other hand, I was excited. This is America. I was thinking, I'm going to just land in America, the country I've been thinking about for so many years. And so it was, and I landed my brother and I were landed at the same time. We came to the US at the same time, and together we had $75. So you can imagine the anxiety that we had, how we'll survive. But there's a way. In the US, there's always a way.
So I assume. Sorry, I'm muting myself because I'm getting a little bit of feedback back from your end. I'm not sure. We weren't able to do the tech check, and so I've also gotten word that it's hard to understand when I speak. But I want to try to tie in something here in a couple of minutes. If I can get that resolved on my end, I'll try a couple of things. Anyway, so I assume the Baha'i community further helped you and your brother when you arrived in the United States, get your feet on the ground and help you, overcome the fact that you only had $75 between you.
So while the US, when I was in Pakistan, offered me asylum, US would require me finding a sponsor in the US, and that sponsor basically would agree to help me get on my feet and be able to get my life in order. The sponsor that I initially had was a local spiritual assembly, a Baha'i spiritual assembly, which is an elected body that's responsible for the affairs of Baha'is in a town. And a local spiritual assembly out of Alaska had sponsored me. But then I had also
which one? Because I lived in Alaska. I graduated from high school in Palmer, Alaska.
It was an island called Cake. And but I had a cousin in the US. He lived in California. He'd also offered to sponsor my brother and I, and we took his sponsorship. But my cousin was 21 years old, and what he could offer us wasn't financial support, but rather was help us get a job, help us get started, help us learn the language. And that's exactly what he did. He selflessly helped us however he could. So we did not receive financial assistance from any Baha'i institutions, but rather my cousin, within a few days, helped both my brother and I have jobs. I had two jobs that I started almost concurrently. One job was working with him at a pizza place where he was a manager, and he hired me to work at that pizza place. And the second job I got was to work at a silk screen printing. And there was this gentleman named Patrick that he had a shop that he would print t-shirts with all kinds of interesting and not always clean prints for truck stops. And so I did that. I worked at the pizza place and I did silk screen printing.
Wonderful. But then you got into technology. You studied at a university in Southern California.
So I finished high school. I had 1 year of high school left. I went to Bayer High School in Modesto. And then I ended up going to UC Davis outside of Sacramento, where I studied environmental toxicology. And initially it started because I decided to go into environmental toxicology because I thought that I wanted to become a doctor. But then soon I realized that, again, in my book, I talk about this quite a bit, about all of my entrepreneurial endeavors as a kid back in Iran. And I had some experiences in the US that brought all of that back to light in my mind. And I decided that I want to be an entrepreneur, and becoming a doctor is not the right path for me. And but I still thought that environmental toxicology was the right major, because this is the early 90s and there were a lot of opportunities were coming about that has something to do with the environment. And I was really excited about the idea of starting a firm to clean up Superfund sites and or write environmental impact reports and so on. So that was my path. And when I graduated from UC Davis in 1994, my brother the same year graduated as well and got a job at Microsoft. He was a technologist. And one day he called me up in November of that year, and he introduced me to the internet because he had an idea that he thought could be a business online. And so he brought me the idea. I didn't know what the internet was until he signed me up, and he, in a sense, showed it to me.
So was that idea the one that became reply.com?
So that idea was Autoweb.com. So, I had come to the US as a 17-year-old when I arrived. And as you can imagine, coming to the US, 17-year-old who's seen all kinds of American movies. And then I ended up in Modesto, where American Graffiti Night was filmed there. Cruising was still happening every Friday and Saturday evening, bumper-to-bumper traffic in this small town in the middle of, Central Valley, California. Cars were a big deal. So I had owned a lot of different cars, cheap cars. So when my brother came to me in 1994, he said, "Payam, what do you think about the idea of starting a website that could become a business, that we would help consumers learn a lot about cars and the car that they were potentially interested in purchasing before they go to a dealership?" I love the idea. I felt like I'd been a victim of car dealers often enough that I wanted to help consumers with that experience. And, we could have selected any name, but these were the days that only 5,000 domains were registered. Frankly, I probably would have made more money if I would have just registered domain names and sold them later. But we picked Autoweb, Autos on the Web, Autoweb. So that became our business. But at the same time, it became our business, but we had no idea what the opportunity was like. We had a passion for it. And I always tell people, the internet companies that were started in the early to mid 90s, they came out of passion, not because somebody thought that they can become a millionaire by building them.
So tell us then about the evolution that then led to your success prior to forming One Planet Group and what you're doing now.
So we built Autoweb. We were fortunate enough to be at the right place, right time, met the right people, many wonderful people who helped us build Autoweb. And then we took Autoweb public in 1999. It turned out to be one of the more successful IPOs of the dot-com era. And you can imagine that that happened 11 years after I had come to the US. So 11 years after I showed up in the US with $75 on the West Coast. And, March 23rd, 1999, I'm in New York, and our company is just valued $1.2 billion. So, of course, this is like one of those things that you're thinking that only in America something like this can happen. And I believe that. I think only in America it can happen. But there was also something else that was going through my mind at the time, that I feel like I need to do it again, and I need to do bigger, because that's what Silicon Valley does to you. Or I think that's what capitalism does to you. You keep defining yourself by the latest thing you've done. If you're an entrepreneur, by the latest business you've founded, taken public, sold. Because the journey itself is typically not fulfilling enough. So you think there's got to be more to it. Maybe if I build another company, a bigger company, even though I've already made enough money, maybe it will get interesting. Now, as luck would have it, a dot-com bust also followed. That the value of these businesses went down dramatically. And I also got exposed to the darker side of capitalism and the darker side of Wall Street specifically, that how stock prices are manipulated, how the system is rigged, how there is really, at least in many cases, not enough of an interest to build companies, but rather create value in stocks and sell the stock, whether or not there's a business that can continue beyond, a few years. So I decided ultimately over the years to come, it didn't happen overnight, but over the years to come, that I wanted to do things differently. And I thought there's an opportunity to elevate business to a level that we could gain a lot more out of it, that a business could be good for humanity also. There was specifically there was a conference I went to, and the CEO of a nonprofit spoke. And I remember turning to my wife and saying that, I'm jealous. She said, why? I said, here's the CEO of this nonprofit speaking. And every day her life is service to humanity. Every day she's gaining fulfillment from what she does. She doesn't have to think about, maybe on the weekend I'll have time to do something of service. Every day her job is service. Why is it that we leave betterment of the world to nonprofits and greed to for-profits? Why is that? How did that come about? So I do firmly believe that businesses, for the sake of, even if it's not for the betterment of the world, for the sake of themselves, for the CEO, the founder, the executive team, the employees, choose to have a just cause, choose to stand for something beyond money, because then that will make the journey itself so fulfilling that they're not going to think that I have to keep building another company after another company in order to feel like I'm worth anything or I'm worth something, because the competition no longer exists. I want to serve humanity. And if that's done through my business, excellent.
Thank you. I can relate to so many aspects of your journey. I also was involved in several startups. I was with a large consulting firm. You may know them, Deloitte Consulting.
Sure.
I actually did some consulting work for kellybluebook.com. So I was listening to Autoweb, and I know a little bit about that space. Every really successful business serves a need, right? So I think, whatever business you're in, I think the human element can see the work that is being done in good terms. I mean, and I also know that the Baha'i faith teaches that work is worship, right? And so I hear you, and absolutely there is a dark side, and yet so much benefit has come from being able to build companies that raise standard of living, that create products and services that help others, right? So where is the balance, and how are you achieving that with your new venture?
I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, absolutely. And I think that the concept of work when it's offered in the spirit of service as worship, to me, there's a sense of it's almost like freedom. It allows me to live my life every day, almost as though I'm praying, as though I'm living a life that's worth living. That is something that brings fulfillment. And I think that the concept, the idea that today we measure success by how much one can accumulate and how much of goods and services of the world that person has the ability to consume seems highly, highly archaic. It may have worked at some point in the past, I don't know when, but it clearly leaves a lot of us kind of empty. You look at people who are worth billions and they feel like, I got to keep going. I got to be worth even more. If I'm worth 100 billion, I want to be worth 200 billion. But why? Why is it that is driving people while you know that you have employees that they are probably still struggling, while you know that your business is going into business lines that can potentially put the average Joe out of business on Main Street in our towns. But you feel like you have to keep going because that's what defines you. And I feel like there's fundamentally something wrong with that way of thinking, that for our own sake, we need to improve. Now, also, I don't believe that laws are going to help us to change our approach, change our mentality. I think it takes a spiritual awakening, a spiritual revolution, or whatever you want to call it, for us to get there. That I realize that, you know what, making money is good, but I want to be ethical about it. I want to make money, but at the same time, I don't want to make money in a way that my profit leaves a loss behind. My profit can only represent profit, not just for me, but for humanity. I think that there are ways that we are able to do that. And frankly, I'll give you a few examples. Imagine if our businesses give sacrificially, not 1% that some of the Silicon Valley companies they have coined, but rather sacrificially to nonprofit causes. Imagine if our businesses, they say that what social impact they stand for. These are not social impact businesses, but rather a company like NVIDIA that's doing amazingly well. What do you care about? What do you want to see improve on the planet? Stand for that. Give 20% of your stocks to that. Give 10% of your profits to that. That sacrificial way of caring for humanity will bring so much value, so much consciousness to your employees, to everyone who's running that entity, to even your shareholders, that they will gain more than just money from that business. And what's interesting also is that my experience tells me when you do that, your profits actually improve. They don't go the wrong direction. Think about employees. We know millennials want to get more meaning out of their everyday job. Well, this will give it to them. Think about your customers, your vendors, your ecosystem that you are a part of. Everybody wants to be a part of that kind of a business. And that makes your business also more successful. But there's one caveat to that, and that is you need to have a long-term horizon. You cannot just run your business based on manipulating and managing your stock for the next 90 days, as Wall Street has taught us. You got to go way beyond that. You got to think about, I'm going to build a business that's the right business. Even if it's going to take me 10 years to build it, who cares about the next 90 days?
Well, so there are, as you know, I'm sure there are already efforts underway, conscious capitalism, triple bottom line.
Yeah.
So what's your take on some of those efforts to, you mentioned that absolutely it cannot be done with laws, i.e. regulation. We can't regulate our way out of materialism, right? And it's been tried. And we also have, the communist approach, apart from God, no ownership, and that's produced some of the greatest disasters in human history. So how are you looking at what the practical tactical solution is for doing what you're proposing, including existing initiatives around conscious capitalism and triple bottom line and so on?
Yeah, no, that's. I think that many of those efforts are praiseworthy and they are good. As an entrepreneur, I feel that we need to be careful to not build businesses that are not necessarily good businesses, but they say, but wait a minute, I'm a social impact business. Don't expect me to be that good of a business. And I think that, we need to be careful to understand that a business should be built to be a good business, to be a successful enterprise. But that doesn't mean that that successful enterprise cannot adopt a successful nonprofit. Because and you see this happening all the time, that you get the founder of a major software company that has made a ton of money, all of a sudden he thinks, and usually they're guys, he thinks that I can also solve the problems in Africa, whatever they may be. I don't know. I mean, I think that there are many people who have thought long and hard. They have invested their life in figuring those things out. And maybe we are better off adopting what they're doing than trying to recreate and trying to assume that I'm so good that I can do that too. That's one. The second thing I think is considering the intention that we have behind everything that we do. So, people ask me often, are you afraid of AI? I'm like, I don't know. I could be afraid of the innovator behind the AI, but the AI by itself, no, it's just another technology. But if the innovator means harm, then yeah, I'm going to be very afraid of that. It's just like any other form of technology I could be afraid of. So I think that, and I want to absolutely encourage and challenge executive teams, CEOs, entrepreneurs, even individuals. When you make financial decisions, consider for a moment the intention and the ripple effect of that decision. What's your intention? What do you want to achieve? If I am at Snapchat that serves many teenagers all over the country and the world, and I allow a form of rating of friends that the friends know how they rate compared to other friends that I have, is that good? Is that going to contribute to mental health challenges that teenagers already have? Or am I going to do it regardless because it's good for profits and my stock price, and I'm going to go from $2 billion to $4 billion in net worth? I think that is what I mean by that we're going to consider the intention and the ripple effect of our financial decisions. I think when we get there and we say that, you know what, I'm going to say no to anything that while may be legal, but may not be good for humanity. If we can get there, and again, no law can do that, but if we can get there, I think we have elevated ourselves dramatically.
Yeah, clearly business models, business ideas that cater to the baser human instincts, cater to things that form addictions, cater to those negative aspects that too many of us, are tempted by in classic religious the carnal desires, right? The things that the 10 commandments were designed to work against, the things we were told not to do, right? By the basic Mosaic law of the 10 commandments. When those things can be exploited for profit, and they are exploited for profit.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think you talked though about helping nations in Africa. And I know I have to keep my words very limited because there's a lot of feedback, and I feel like I can hardly understand myself, and I don't know if the audience can understand me at all. But I want to focus on the difference between top down, which corporations, right? They're governed by a board and they're top down. They have a CEO, a chief executive officer, and a C-suite. By the way, I do have an MBA. I've been involved in business, so I understand this. But you're talking really more about things that have to happen from the bottom up. What's working on the ground, small local initiatives where things are working, and these things have to be supported and encouraged rather than somebody coming in and saying, here's how you must do it. Is that what I'm gathering?
Yes, I feel so. Who knows? And let's say if we're talking about Africa, who knows Gambia better than the Gambians? And I'll give you an example. We, my wife and I, and our company, we felt that there are two causes that we should care about deeply. One is education of women and girls and their empowerment globally, and the second thing is racial healing in this country, because I feel that that is America's most challenging issue. And by the way, I feel like as an immigrant, I should actually care about that to a great deal, because I benefited from a country that was partly built unjustly. And if I feel like, who cares? I wasn't here when the bad things happened in the 1800s or before that. That's not good enough. I'm benefiting from a country that I should somehow contribute positively back to. And but anyhow, so these two are matters that we care about deeply, and they're the just causes that One Planet cares about deeply. So in the case of Gambia, we decided that, all right, well, we don't know enough about Gambia. What do we do? And there is an organization called Starfish International. They're in Banjul and ran by a wonderful human being who's Gambian, has built this wonderful oasis of hope with this after school program. That's a girl empowerment program. And you see how these girls are becoming the future leaders of Gambia and Africa. And to me, that is the way to do it, rather than me showing up and saying that I built a successful internet company, so I'm also able to figure out what girl empowerment should be done in Gambia. What do I know? And that, those grassroots opportunities and projects are the ones that really require support. And I hope that we can all stand for that. But I think there's one more thing when we talk about companies going beyond, way beyond, just in a sense, rhetoric and living the life that will make them a better company. These days we talk a lot about DEI and about diversity. Many companies, many large companies, that they contribute a lot to environmental problems, all kinds of issues. They have a head of DEI. And I think part of the problem is that we look at DEI as something that is a check mark, that I care about DEI, I have a head of DEI, maybe I have a department that worries about DEI, so I want to show the world I care about it. I give 1% to charitable causes because I want to show the world that I care about. But I think we need to go beyond window dressing collectively. Time's up. We got to go way beyond that. And we got to see how we can actually make the world a better place in a meaningful way. When you look at Google, Apple, Meta, and you see that fewer than 30% of their employees are women. This is America. Fewer than 30% of their employees are women. And those women are in their 20s. Why? Because moms are not as likely to work for them, because of the culture that they have, because of just the way that those businesses are operated. To me, there's a way to fix these things if we actually care, if we actually think that we become a stronger business the moment we look like humanity, because I want to serve humanity. I got to look like humanity. So I think that there is a lot that companies are trying to do, but they're trying to do because they feel like that's good PR, because that's a good check mark that they get next to their brand. You can't fake these things. You got to do it right from bottoms up. That should become part of the DNA of your business.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about One Planet Group and how you are implementing those principles in that venture. And
Sure.
first of all, what is it? What does it do? And then how do you implement those principles into that venture?
So One Planet is, for lack of a better term, is a sort of a private equity. And we own a few technology companies, and we invest in other startups as well. And it's interesting, in Silicon Valley, for example, only about 2% of the VC money goes to women and people of color. And in our business, 60% of the money we invest goes to women founders and people of color founders, or companies that are run by them. And we don't feel like there's a shortage of finding great entrepreneurs that they happen to fit that. So I think it's important for people to realize, I'm not suggesting that we have figured things out. Come look at One Planet and you can look at a great model. We are in a humble posture of learning, attempting to learn. We think we know where we want to go, and every day we make a ton of mistakes, but we think we know that North Star, and we want to go towards that North Star. There are a few things that we do. We wanted to make sure that we have a culture that is understood by everybody. So we documented our culture that is based on spiritual values, and we share that with all of our new employees and existing employees in study circle format. So when employees join us, they know exactly what it is. We offer service days, paid service days to our employees. We want them to get used to a life of service. And we don't want them to feel like they're giving up anything for doing that, so the company does. They get paid on those days. If they can offer a service, great. If they don't, they're not forced. It's up to them. We give sacrificially to nonprofit causes. We adopt nonprofit causes, and we think that should be part of our business. We try to lead with love. That is our number one and our core value. We think truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues. So as a result, we're not going to lie to our clients or anybody for any reason. Even if we lose a lawsuit, we're not going to lie. And there are many other aspects of our corporate culture, and innovation plus intention. That is the tagline of our company. We think about the intention behind our decisions. And I tell my employees, if our success requires someone else's demise, we should be in a different business. Because if people love to use our product, they use our product, so be it. But I'm not going to wake up every day thinking that somebody should go out of business for me to succeed. To me, that is not the way I want to live. I want to behave. Those are some examples, but it's more about, I think, the DNA of how you behave. It's about the spiritual principles that you sign up for, and it's going way beyond lip service, way beyond just having core values, but thinking about how is that going to affect my bottom line? Am I going to sacrificially also give to the point that it will affect the amount of money I have left for other financial decisions for the enterprise? And so I just think that you need to go layers deeper. Our employee count is only a few hundred, and we have for a long time had about 50% women, 50% men in our company. And in the last couple of years, we acquired a few businesses, and now we have 46% women and 54% men. If you talk to my management team, they'll tell you that I remind them all the time, we need to be back at 50-50. That's what the world looks like. And we need to be there because, again, you cannot serve humanity if you don't look like humanity.
So do you experience any challenges with the classic auditing, fiduciary responsibility, those kinds of accountabilities in terms of you conducting your business in this manner? When you talk about sacrificial generosity, that would go against the typical. And I assume One Planet is not a public company, but if it were, how would you navigate those things?
Yeah, that's a great point. You're right. One Planet is not a public company, and so as a result, we have a lot of freedom of how we do things. But I think that a publicly traded company, so let's say Amazon is worth, I don't know, let's say 2 trillion or close to it these days. If Amazon tomorrow would come and say that from now on, the board has decided that 20% of our profits will go to whatever causes. Well, that would be a big number, and there would be a lot of eyebrows that would be raised by Wall Street that why are you doing that? That's bad business. But ultimately, I think that what would happen is, the worst thing that can happen is that the stock price would, in a sense, shift and would communicate the fact that this company is a different kind of a company and cares about the betterment of the world. And the stock price could go down, but it may not, because the public market at the same time would know that you are giving money to charitable causes, but you don't have to. That's not baked in overhead. That is not something that is a contractual obligation you have to keep giving. So if times were to get difficult, you could stop that. The point is that has not changed the health of your business, but that has just changed the way you're willing to distribute capital. But there's a lot more things that Amazon can do today.
Right. Well, but of course, the money would come from somebody's pocket as it was going into somebody else's pocket, and the shareholders might revolt, and they might, try to remove those board members that has made that decision. Of course, that could also happen, right? That's how the market works, because the shareholders are technically owners, and if the shareholders manage to aggregate 51% of the shares, they can then say we don't like this, and they could stop it. So those are some of the challenges that a public company would face versus a private company, right?
You're absolutely right, and there are other ways that you can also achieve the same thing. If you go back to the and then you can basically, in a sense, slowly get to that point. An example would be um, you could offer service days to your employees. Nobody will object to that. In fact, you may improve the likelihood of your employees stay with you longer rather than jumping jobs all the time. There's no reason you cannot consider the intention behind your
Right.
decisions and consider the consequences of your financial decisions. There is no reason that you could not immediately decide that I'm not going to do things that will cause harm to humanity, even if
Right.
that means I'm not going to cause Main Street businesses to get shut down, because I think that reduces the choices for consumers, even though it could be good for us. It's not good for humanity. I mean, there are lots of decisions you can make that are not as drastic. But if today I'm going to invest in a company, I want that company to be willing to think be a lot more of a maverick, and be willing from ground up, from day one, to build that company differently.
Right. I guess I'm 100% aligned with you and what you're saying. I'm in violent agreement with you. But I'm also addressing the structural challenges, right, which calls out the need for each and every individual to look at their own choices, because however powerful Jeff Bezos is, or Andy Grove, or Payam Zamani, they are one person, and they are making a difference in their sphere within the constraints of their
Sure.
ability. And each and every consumer should also be making these decisions. Each and every consumer who responds to those negative tactics, who wants those negative products, who wants to consume things that are harmful to themselves and to others, that are you follow me? A transformation of the minds and hearts of every single human being is ultimately needed for
Yeah.
the world to be transformed. We can't just point fingers at the rich and powerful and say they need to do something. It has to happen at the grassroots level.
You're absolutely right. Every one of us make financial decisions every single day. Every one of us have a role to play, and every one of us, as long as we have a dollar to spend, we have a ripple effect that we have to consider as we spend that money. But I want to just go back for a moment, because I think that you are bringing up a very important point, that once you're a public company, you're at some level at the mercy of your shareholders and of Wall Street. And I remember when we took Autoweb public, we were so happy that our stock price went from $14 to $50 in a day, within 24 hours. And I was excited. Now, when I was only 28 years old, I didn't know any better. And later on, I realized how that happened. So how that happened was our bankers, which later on they got sued for that, for their actions, what they had done was laddering, which I didn't know what that meant, meaning that they sold shares at $14 to a bunch of people at IPO, but in return for that, they had received their commitment. I don't know if it was verbally or written, I assume verbally, that they will also buy as many shares in the public market at a higher price, ensuring that the price would go up post IPO. The point is, there is no question that the system is rigged as it is operated today. There is no question that Wall Street rigs stock prices, manipulates stock prices all the time. So, yeah, there needs to be a system here that, changes not just for the entrepreneurs and the CEOs or the way of thinking, but I think that we need to see a different way of thinking in Wall Street, probably to begin with, because they are the cause of many of the bad behavior we see within companies.
Well, and Abdul Baha, I'm sure you're familiar with this, some even Baha'is may not know it, actually addressed some specifics around this in terms of companies making sure that their employees also had the ability to, in some sense, share in the profits, maybe become owners. He doesn't describe the exact system. You follow me? But
Yes.
he of course advises us that we should be thinking about these things and coming up with innovative models to equitably share the benefits out with the people who are creating those benefits. And of course capitalism seeks to do that, right? But greed and envy and all of those negative characteristics that we may from time to time fall into or be tempted by whatever, they play in and they start exacerbating human behavior, and people start getting in positions where they can do laddering and many other inventions. When I was at Deloitte, I saw some of it, which is why I ultimately ended up leaving Deloitte Consulting, because of things that were exactly that, SEC violations that should have been front page Wall Street Journal whistleblowers had you been able to provide the smoking gun, right? But of course it's very challenging to take on those big money interests and those big corporations with those kinds of things.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that capitalism, as we are practicing it today, is what we were taught by Milton Friedman. And it is, it reminds me of the movie Wall Street, that greed is good. And we've been taught that. And we may, there may be people that they hear that they go like, well, no, not really. But no, that's exactly what it is. The way it's operating today, it's when we talk about maximization of shareholder value, it is that anything that is not good for business then is bad for business. And that is not true. Business is not just business. Business touches humans. Business employs humans. It serves humans. So thinking that business is just business is as far from truth as it can possibly be. And we need to find a balance here. Otherwise, businesses will continue to harm environment, because that's something not for us to worry about, because I need to maximize shareholder value. When I'm running a company that's perfectly profitable, but my stock price is in the dump, what do? I let my employees go. I reduce the headcount so I can show Wall Street that, look, I just had let a bunch of people go, so I become even more profitable to make you happy. The next day, stock price goes up. And, it's bad for business, even the long-term vision of the business, but they will do that because that's what Wall Street expects. So I think that there is, and, truth be told, I'm eager to get back into the public markets again at some point, because I would like to experiment to see, is it possible? Is it possible? Or is it completely wishful thinking that a public company can operate within this ecosystem, having a better model, a different model? I think it's possible.
I agree with you. I think we're already over time. I would like to have you back at some point in the near future and continue this topic, continue this discussion. For right now, we have actually. I'm not sure if there were some other technical difficulties. We have not had the kind of audience participation that we often have. Um, uh, it's also just possible that people are just completely fascinated and just listening, and maybe it's also possible that we're not as deep into religion as we often are, and some of the audience aren't really sure how to comment on this topic. But what I'd like to suggest is that we will follow the comments as we continue to market this show, and when your book comes out, we'll look to get copies to those people at that time, because you know we do have a few comments here, but I don't know what really to there. I'm not seeing questions. There's a lengthy comment by one of our audience members and his son's entrepreneurship. But I'm not seeing how to really engage with the audience comments at the moment. So Payam, what would you like to leave the audience with here as we approach the end of the show today? I mean, it's just been fascinating to me listening to you and
Sure.
diving into these questions, and I want to dive a lot deeper and talk about these things more. But I think we're running out of time now, and we'll have to wrap it up.
I tell you what I tell my kids, what I tell people I work with, that you need to start with optimism that, it is possible to do things differently, to do things better. It is possible to say and believe that maybe the way that things have been done for a long time is not the way to do. Maybe they serve the purpose, but not today. And I think that all of us would agree that there is a lot wrong with the world as we know it today. And that's okay. It has served the purpose up to now. But I think it's also time for us to forge a better path that will be good for all of us, will be good for humanity. And again, I go back to why I wrote this book. I wrote this book because I wanted to bring hope to that teenager who's in the other side of the world and trying to figure out, how am I going to survive? How am I going to do better? And it's also for that entrepreneur here in the US that wants to bring more meaning to his or her own life. And I do believe that there is a way, and that's why I've shared my story. I lost your voice, Wade, but
because I was on mute again. We do have some of the audience members jumping in with comments now after I made that comment.
sure.
Very informative. Thank you, Sue Emil. Mesmerized, riveted, fascinated, ears wide open. And Wendy Blue Manuel, awesome. So thank you so much. We will now they're coming in. Love this. Thank you both. So we are at the end of the show. I'm going to just quickly let everybody know what to expect next week, and then we'll have to wrap it up. So next week we have Julie Raboa, same time, same place. By the way, 8 p.m. Central Time. Julie Raboa has founded. She's the founder of something called From Bud to Bloom, an online community dedicated to supporting adult children overcoming painful crisis. Julie Raboa has a mission to help individuals embrace God's truth, freeing them from guilt, shame, and condemnation. So you won't want to miss Julie Raboa, fascinating person with a fascinating story to talk about those topics. Payam, I sincerely hope we will find a way to have you back on the show soon to dive more into these topics. I'd love to connect with you personally and learn more about One Planet. It has been a wonderful, wonderful show, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us tonight.
Thank you, Wade. Appreciate it. Good seeing you.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you next week. Until then, may God be with you.